Okay.
Welcome everyone to this workshop on bridging the data gap to transform childcare, Arizona story. My name is Louise Stoney. I am from Opportunities Exchange, and I'm here with a wonderful panel of colleagues. First, I'm actually going to describe them from the bottom up. So Leila Wendell is from the interim assistant director from the Arizona Department of Economic Security. Carla Hoteling is the program manager for Southwest Human Development in Phoenix, Arizona. And Alma Cortez is the director of Faith Lutheran Preschool. And we're all going to have a discussion about data and the work that's happening in Arizona. Next slide. So let's walk through the agenda. I'm going to begin by framing this and talk about what's broken in early care and education and how technology can make a difference. Then we're going to first hear from Carla, who's going to talk about the work that they've been doing at Southwest to change the business of childcare. Then we're going to hear from Alma, who's going to talk very specifically about a provider who's worked and done some of that work with Carla. And then lastly, we're going to hear from Leila to talk about the changes that she's leading at the state level to make all of these pieces fit together. And at the end, we're going to have a short discussion among the group. So that's the agenda. And with that, let's move on. Okay, so what's broken? Well, I don't have to tell this audience that early care and education was broken way before COVID-19. But the pandemic just made everything harder. And it's just gone on. And it's made financial sustainability a much more difficult thing. And so what we're trying to do at Opportunities Exchange is to think about how we use this tragedy as an opportunity to reinvent the sector. What can we do differently? How do we use ARPA money in new ways? And so that's what we're going to talk to you about today. Some really exciting work that's happening in Arizona. Next slide. So many of you may have seen an issue brief that we released at Opportunities Exchange, but if you haven't, it's called Reinvent versus Rebuild. Let's fix the childcare system. And we cite 5 game changers for the field. These are cited here. And we're going to really talk about several of these in the course of this presentation today, but a real laser focus on automation and business coaching, as well as scale and real-time supply and demand. Next slide. Here's the crux. Early care and education is one of the last sectors in the United States economy to benefit from a technology transformation. And we believe that this is our moment. This is our moment to really shift the field in some important new ways. Next slide. Now, the cool thing is that before COVID, very few providers were using technology. But when the crisis happened, one of the sort of interesting hidden linings in this pandemic was that we all rapidly had to learn to use technology, right? Suddenly, we all became proficient at Zoom. Providers started using touchless check-in. Providers that weren't using electronic banking started doing it because we had to. And so we're trying to build on that knowledge to really shift now, where pre-pandemic, we guessed that maybe a third of providers were using some form of technology. We really want to build on this experience and say, hey, now let's move the whole field into the 20th century. Let's get every provider using an automated technology system, and let's really build on this new feeling of capacity. Like we sort of figured out how to do Zoom. We figured out how to do touchless check-in. You know, we're probably ready for the next step. Next slide. So many of you who are familiar with our work at Opportunities Exchange have probably seen this slide before. But at the very top, this is our formula for success. In order to run a successful early care and education business, you need pedagogical leadership. And those are all the things in the box below: child development expertise, classroom coaching, teacher supervision, child assessment, all those things that are about teaching and learning. You also need business leadership. If you're going to bring money in the door and be able to pay your staff, You got to be looking at full enrollment, full fee collection, all those things that keep the business going. Both of those things are essential. And yet, sadly, in early care and education, both of those tasks often fall on the shoulders of one overwhelmed individual. And that just makes for an impossible job. Next slide. So we're really trying to address that. And the typical response when you think about sort of trying to support providers is business training, right? Let's give providers business training. Well, we've learned at Opportunities Exchange that business training doesn't work very well. If you look to the right of the screen, this is really fascinating data for me. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but this is real stuff. It's called the forgetting curve. You can Google it. But do you know that in 1 week, 90% of what is taught in a one and done workshop is forgotten? So how do we overcome that? And again, we're talking about directors that are overwhelmed. We're talking about teachers that are overwhelmed. What we've learned is that we give providers tools to help them do their job, tools to help them save time. And we teach them business in the context of those tools. Then we have a secret sauce that can make a big difference. And we also make those tools very affordable, either for free or low cost. Next slide. So the other thing that's really important is what I call the iron triangle of early care and education finance. So I've spent my career really working on early care and education policy and finance. And if I had to take everything that I know and boil it down into one simple picture, it's this. In order to be successful, childcare programs have to be full, every seat, every day. They have to be collecting their fees in full and on time, every seat. And they have to right-size their tuition. In other words, they have to set their prices to cover their cost, or they have to have third-party funding to fill the gap. And they have to be doing this every day, every week. It's a simple formula to understand. It is super hard to do, almost impossible. But one of the things that we're learning is that when technology is focused on that, when metrics are focused on that, when dashboards are focused on that, you really help providers stay on track, and you help them to be able to make decisions about shifting things in the moment because they've got real data to work with. So that's a real laser focus of the business support work. Next slide. And what's cool is that technology can help us do this. So what you see on this slide is the same thing, the iron triangle, right? But you're seeing how a technology system, like a child care management system, can help providers do each one of those things. And for those of you who aren't familiar with child care management systems, you might know them by their brand names: ProCare, Brightwheel, Smart Care. Or for family child care providers, some of them go by names like Wonder School. So there are different technology tools. We're agnostic at Opportunities Exchange about which tool you pick. Carla's going to talk about the work in Arizona, which is focused on ProCare, but there's lots of different tools you can use. The bottom line is using a child care management system can make a big difference. Next slide. And child care management systems work for a lot of reasons. And we've seen this. We've seen providers save significant time. We've seen providers save money because they're not spending money on staff that they didn't need before because technology can help. We've really seen them increase revenue. And you'll see in a minute some real data from a project that does that. And we've also seen providers feel stronger, smarter, more empowered because they actually have data that can help them be fiscal managers instead of being up to their necks in paperwork. Next slide. So I said to you before I was going to show you some numbers because in case you don't believe me, I mean, these are real data from a real project. Now, this was before COVID, and it's a project in Atlanta, Georgia, with a network that worked with about 40 childcare providers. It was a mixture of centers and homes. And they got hard data from about 24 of those programs. So what you see in front of you is data from about 24 programs over the course of a year. When the project started, the average bad debt was over $50,000 per program. And what I mean by bad debt is money that programs were not collecting from either parents or government that they could have collected, that it was literally available for them to collect, but they weren't collecting it because they didn't have systems in place. In less than 1 year, this project got that bad debt down to $877. That's $50,000 more money these programs had. They also got enrollment up. Now again, this was pre-COVID. I totally understand programs are struggling with staffing right now. But we've also really learned that, that even though there's, quote, a shortage of childcare, there are often vacancies. And so creating systems in place where directors can fill slots, can fill them quickly, can narrow the gap between the time a slot is open because they've got systems in place and they're maximizing automation, can make a big difference. And you see in this project, enrollment actually grew by 34%, pretty significant. And overall revenue increased by 24,000. So the bottom line is these programs had a lot more money at the end of this project than they did when they began. And nothing changed except they maximized technology and they really benefited from business coaching. Next slide. Now, quite a few may be working with home-based childcare providers, family childcare, and I recognize that that's a very different business. So I'm showing you this picture, which is not, this is not from a real project. This is hypothetical data that I created, but I wanted you just to see what a difference things like a lower, staying full, a lower vacancy rate, or collecting all your fees, lower bad debt can make to the bottom line. And this is a small program serving only 6 children. And I kept the market price consistent. So this particular program could collect on average $600 a month per child, right? And I didn't change that. So the rate didn't change. And yet look at the difference when this program went from a 25% vacancy rate down to a 5% vacancy rate. Look at how much more money they collected. Or when they went from a 15% bad debt to no bad debt. So again, I just want to underscore that we sometimes forget how much management and these systems can make a difference. And we pay a lot of attention to the rate, to tuition. And yes, that matters, but management can matter as much, if not more. Now, so many of you may be working with home-based childcare providers, and I understand that that can be a very different business. So I wanted to show you a picture of a budget in that context. And full disclosure, these are not real numbers. These are numbers that I created for purposes of explanation. But what I did here was I'm basing this on an average monthly price for child of $600, and I didn't change that. But what I did do is adjust the vacancy rate and the bad debt. So what you see here is look at how much more money a provider collects, even in a small home-based provider setting, when they go from being only 75% full to being 95% full, and from having 15% bad debt to no bad debt. And by the way, 15% bad debt is really low bad debt in our experience in family childcare. It is not at all uncommon for us to talk to family childcare providers that tell us they have 25%, 35%, even 50% bad debt. That's how many families are not paying them in full. It's very hard for a family childcare provider to collect money from a family when they have a personal relationship, when they have to look them in the eye and say, pay up. So the bottom line here is, even when you don't change the total price per child, even if the rate is held constant, if we can help providers stay full and collect all the money that's owed to them, we can put more money in their pocket. Next slide. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Arizona story. And what I want to underscore here is what's really exciting about this is the linked work. So I'm going to turn this over in a minute to Carla Hodling from Southwest Human Development, who's going to talk about her work with community-based leaders using childcare management systems and doing business coaching. And then we're going to hear from Leela Wendell in the Arizona Department of Economic Security, who's going to talk about the work that the state is doing to modernize technology. All of this is ARPA investment, and it's investment in really exciting reform. Next slide. And Carla, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you so much. I'm Carla Hofftown with Southwest Human Development, and I'm so happy to be with you today to talk about our Arizona project. Next slide. So the Early Childhood Business Management Program at Southwest is a professional development program where we utilize training and individualized coaching for early childhood professionals in best business management practices, with a real focus, though, to ensure that our Arizona children are nurtured and educated in programs that are financially sustainable. And because Southwest Human Development cares about the quality of programs and the sustainability of early care and education in Arizona, this program came to be. So back in 2019, Southwest Human Development and First Things First here in Arizona were working on a Quality First redesign project as a part of their quality improvement system. And at that time, they wanted to measure whether adding business management support to providers would improve the quality of their program. So since 2019, working with that handful of providers in Arizona, all throughout the state, to build that capacity, that skills and automation, and to help them reduce costs and to save time. And then also to understand that data they were reading in the child care management system that we were onboarding them and showing them how to use. That first project, we saw one provider who on the first day of launching her CCMS collected $2,000 in bad debt, and another program who had over $6,000 in bad debt. After working with her business management specialist in our program, that number went down to 0. So we saw a lot of success in that first pilot. And so in 2001, we began a partnership with Arizona, the Department of Economic Security, Child Care Administration. And so our work now includes all of the things mentioned, automation, best business practices, and obtaining approval for the electronic signatures that providers can use to sign parents in and out. And so we help those providers make sure they're meeting those requirements for that electronic signature capturing, and then successfully launch that feature for their billing and payment so that can be streamlined. So our program really believes in 4 pillars. That is the structure of our program. And that is proficiency into automation, not just having a system. Lots of programs, you can ask them, hey, do you have a system? And they're like, yeah, I have it and I haven't unboxed it. Or I have it, I paid for it for a year and I haven't used it. So we want to help them be proficient and fully utilize that automation. Also, we want to help them really know and understand the iron triangle. So like Louise said, it's very difficult. We want to help them capture that data and understand how that helps with their business metrics. And then we believe that doing that through individualized coaching, not just a one and done training, really helps reinforce those skills and helps build that capacity. And then we utilize recommended policies and procedures. That's that 4th pillar. And so we determined these pillars based on that first pilot of 13, and then our work, obviously, with Opportunities Exchange. So beyond our partnering with the Child Care Administration here in Arizona, we also began in 2020 partnering with ProCare. So we did some preliminary work with them in anticipation of this work with the state. So ProCare provided internally to our staff training in ProCare so that we would be prepared to accept our new cohorts. In addition, we've been working with them and they do help us train our participants. But more than that, we have created a whole onboarding process, because remember, we're talking about that full utilization. So we have a soup to nuts onboarding process that we do with participants in conjunction with our ProCare team so that they get that full onboarding experience. And now we're working with them on customized iron triangle reports and specific training needs that correspond with that iron triangle, and a customized webinar we're working on now to speak specifically to the Child Care Administration's billing requirements and goes in conjunction with their fact sheet. So we've been really excited about that partnership and the capacity building that we have been doing here in Arizona. And we're so lucky to have one of those participants. Oh, nope. Sorry, cut that, pause. All right. And so part of our project with the Child Care Administration this is our timeline of this project. So in May, and part of our process is a whole information session and application process. So starting in May of 2001, we started that recruitment. We sent marketing materials out to Arizona providers throughout the state of Arizona. And we got, along with an application for an interest list. And so then in June, we completed about 10 info sessions to talk about our program, to talk about our outcomes, to talk about the CCMS that we would be using and our partners. And we held those in conjunction with those partners. So Leela and her team through the Child Care Administration attended every one of those info sessions to answer questions. And we also had our partners through the NAEYC toolkit to attend. So we all answered questions and we all showed enthusiasm for the project and talked about what our goals were. And then in July, we started our intakes and our data collection. We did intake, pre-assessment, staff compensation and retention data, demographics, and we did the base work of that iron triangle overview. And then we went into the onboarding of ProCare, and that's kind of where we're at now. And because we are individual based, we moved at the rate of the participant. We know that there's some barriers with the pandemic and with staffing. So we really wanted to be sensitive to the needs of our providers and onboard them in the process in which they were ready. So we had some providers who onboarded in November and some who onboarded in February. And so now from February until the end of this project, we will be teaching them how to read that data that they're capturing and teaching them those business fundamental skills that are so essential in building that foundation, continuing with that iron triangle work with budgeting, marketing, financial reports, understanding financial terms, and staff recruitment and retention. Next slide. So just so you know a little bit about who we're serving here in Arizona, just a little bit of our program demographics. We are serving both family child care licensed participants and certified. So those subsidy certified participants who are not licensed. So we have 11 family child care licensed, 5 that are DES certified, so subsidy certified, 62 centers, and 2 small school districts, and all types. So throughout the state, we are assisting participants. We have faith-based, we have for-profit, not-for-profit, and then even 3 monastery programs that would be considered for-profit. Next slide. We also wanted to know on that initial intake what our education levels were of our participants as far as where would we need to build capacity and how could we best serve them. So as you can see on this slide, most of our participants, 24 of them, some college. So that was our biggest education piece. 10 had a GED and high school diploma, 5 with CDAs, and then down the line. What was interesting in some of this data is many of our participants, even with degrees, did not have degrees in early childhood education. And so I found that to be a very interesting piece as we were moving forward with our participants. Again, at intake, 58 of our participants were participating in our Quality First, our quality rating system here in Arizona, and 22 were not. Because of the expansion here in Arizona for our Quality First system, most of those 22 are now within the system receiving services. Next slide. One of our participants, I'm so excited, is with us today. Alma Cortez with Faith Lutheran Preschool is joining us today, and we have been working together over the last year in this project. So welcome, Alma.
Thank you, Carla.
Thanks for joining us. So when we, in thinking about the time that we've spent together this past year, how has participating in the program changed your work?
What has definitely reduced time spent doing paperwork. It has also improved communication with parents throughout the day. They are open to message me through ProCare, and I can message them back immediately. I've also gained new knowledge in program management and staffing strategies, which has helped me a lot through the time we spent together, and also increased knowledge of financial terms and concepts. This is something that we have to do with budgeting and trying to keep track of tuition that's coming in and revenue. So it's helped me a lot to know all these key terminology I need to know.
Thank you. And so we know that here in Arizona, there's often multiple reporting systems. You have to bill this agency this way, this agency this way. How has using the child care management system that you're using made reporting easier for you?
It has made it really easy. It's really easy to use. We have to do monthly reporting for scholarships. So I had to just go into the ProCare system, look for what I needed, and it immediately gave me everything I needed to report. And the reports are really easy to download, and it takes minutes, seconds to do.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And then how about the financial stability of your program? What benefits have you seen there?
It's made it really easy for parents to use the app and make their tuition payments. We used to have a couple of parents do paper checks and drop them off in the office. So it has helped me reduce time driving to the bank, making those deposits. It's helped them on their end, making payments through their phones. And it also has made it easy to collect tuition and also know families that have outstanding balances. It's easy to know who are the families that have not made any payments and be able to talk to them and invoice them if we need to.
Thank you, Alma. And we've had some fun along the way and some good laughs when we've played our budgeting games and our financial terms. We've had a good time. So we really appreciate you working with us.
Thank you.
So Sharon, let's go back to the next slide. Next, yes. So you just heard a conversation between Carla and Alma, but for those of you who are participating here and you want the PowerPoint, here's a brief summary of the kinds of things that you just heard. And these are wins that we're seeing happening early on in this project, and our experiences is that skill builds on skill builds on skill, and as providers use this, the benefits become even deeper. Next slide. But I think what's really exciting that's happening in Arizona is that now the state is thinking about, so we've been building this from the ground up, boots on the ground sort of capacity with technology, but now how do we build the linkages with the state so that data can travel more seamlessly with the state? So Leela, why don't you take it over and tell us what's happening in the Department of Economic Security?
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity to share this collaborative effort that we have happening here in Arizona. So really looking at the role of the state administrator and even the role of the state in general as it relates to childcare. A couple of key things have happened. Just recently, childcare was elevated to a division level program within our Department of Economic Security. And that really talks to the importance of structure in an organization to really strengthen those collaborative leadership partnerships across state agencies and within the community. Also, it's an opportunity to rethink the way that we work together. So previously, especially in a pre-pandemic environment, so much of our work was done in person. And now it's not. And so how do we use technology, not only in how we now structure our meetings and coordination, but our overall structure of technology. And, we have this amazing opportunity with the ARPA funds to really think about what technological improvements and infrastructure that we need that can have all of this amazing work that Carla and Alma just spoke of continue and be accessible to all providers statewide. And really, it's understanding from a programmatic and policy perspective how to make sure that we're maximizing this opportunity and we can show transparency, data, and accountability in our processes. Next slide, please. So we've worked so closely with Opportunities Exchange and Southwest Human Development to really talk about the what and the why, like the what. So here at DES, we're really committed to investments to improve the overall ECE network. What we have now is very disparate data. We have at least 5 entities, state agencies that have to work together to make the system work seamlessly. Really up to this point, the way that we look at our systems, we don't have the capacity to have a digital environment and interaction with our providers. We also need to understand that providers are not necessarily eager to jump on technological solutions. So just really understanding that is important as part of the change management. And really what we're all here for is just building the cohesive set of resources for our parents that really help them find the best care and information that they need for their families and their children. And so that really speaks to the why. So we know that we operate in silos. We know that there are so many reasons why the system is the way that it is now, but it's an opportunity to now challenge that. So we can understand, parents do have to go to various places to understand what childcare resources are available to them. It's not a one-stop shop. Providers, as we just heard, are dealing with so many things on an administrative and programmatic level. So how can we make this a comprehensive service and something that they can really use to make sure that they have confidence that they'll be able to stay as a childcare provider for the long haul? And really, what is the state's role in showing that especially these additional ARPA funds have been invested wisely and can really show the impact to our public investments? Next slide, please. So currently, we have quite a disparate system, as I had mentioned before. And this graphic helps to kind of show where we are right now. So currently, families engage with our child care resource and referral, mostly through a 1-800 number. There's also a website where parents can do a search, but a lot of times it may require a phone call as well to really understand the availability of child care. From a licensing perspective, we are just now, in the last few weeks, transitioning to a more digitized and automated licensing system. Previously, very paper-based, even though some forms may have been available, PDF, so much of the documentation was still paper-based. And when it comes to the CCDF subsidy management system, that application is still very paper-based with paper-based case files, letters that still get sent. And so it's a very manual process. We still have paper sign-in and sign-out sheets that then have to get sent back into us, many times with errors or corrections, and it can become a very exhaustive multi-month process to get reimbursement. Then we have our partners that run programs like CACFP, IDEA Parts A and B, and our early education systems, which are in our Department of Education. And so we recognize that there are also regulators in this similar provider environment. And so they do have their own set of processes, systems, and regulations. Also, we have IDEA Part C, our Arizona Early Intervention Program, which is another component and a huge opportunity to really strengthen the early intervention component as it relates to our child care settings. And as we've also talked about, our sister agency, First Things First, focused on birth to 5, has our quality rating and improvement system. And that is still also yet another portal for providers to engage in. Next slide, please. So in the dream world, again, in partnership with Southwest Human Development Opportunities Exchange and many of our partners, we really thought, what do we want this to look like? And because of a lot of the work that Southwest Human Development was able to do, we saw the child care management software systems as the key to really simplifying processes for child care providers. How do we leverage that as their system that they use to help manage their daily, weekly, monthly operations? How do we leverage that and have systems that then interface through behind the scenes magic to really provide the reimbursements in an automated way? And we didn't stop dreaming there. How is the licensing requirements being able to be shared through APIs, through other technological systems? And all of this information sharing and data can help us build a parent search portal. So something that can provide real-time availability of childcare. That helps families, it helps state agencies really understand where recruitment efforts are needed. It helps our child care partners to, also assess services and outreach. And so it's a really amazing opportunity to think about how the state level system partners can come together to recognize this opportunity of data and information sharing, and think about one portal. I mean, ideally one portal for providers to have where they're also fulfilling all regulatory requirements and reporting requirements for our state level systems teams. Next slide, please. So also we recognize that it's really important to get everyone understanding why, what's in it for me. And so here are some areas of the value proposition. So for child care providers, as we heard from Alma, it only takes seconds to download these reports and how they've structured their utilization of the CCMS. So saves time on administrative tasks. We also heard that being able to see where parents are with fee collection, projected revenues perhaps, from CCDF subsidy and elsewhere, that really helps understand how to manage their business metrics. Being able to analyze and measure, what capacity looks like, what changes can be made is super important. And I thought what was so great too about Alma's presentation was, just understanding that parents are feeling more comfortable with their interactions. They have access to information, they feel communicated and part of this process. Next slide, please. And so then here, that is for families as well, as I just mentioned. They're able to also search for childcare programs. We know that the first place we all go to when we have a question is the internet. So, being able to have a digital hub that can answer all of their questions is very important. When there are other needs or resources that may also apply, how do we connect that in a digital environment? And really the deeper engagement, again, just feeling comfortable and part of the process, not feeling like the process has been built for them to navigate. No, it's built to really help them connect with the childcare and other resources that they need. Next slide, please. And for state administrators, I could go on for 45 minutes on this. I mean, there are so many areas of how we can think about the work that we do differently that really has a more efficient use of our staff time and helps our staff, shift a lot of their focus to the reason they work in childcare in support of this program in the first place. It's really to help engage and improve outcomes for children and families. So we're also really cognizant of being accountable to the different fraud protection measures and reporting of resources. And by having this automation, it's extremely valuable to have it. Also, it really promotes accountability. So having data really shows progress and gaps in where we maybe need to do a little bit more research and improvement. And really thinking about what does this look like as a long-term investment? What is that opportunity to measure across systems is a dream that's not too far in the future. And I think all of this is also what we all know and feel every day. We know that there's a huge return on investment of these public dollars, but it's being able to tell that story in a cohesive picture across state partners. So I think that's extremely important as well. Next slide, please.
So thanks, Leela. This has been a really fun panel. And we hope the audience is hearing is that this change is happening because it's happening at both levels, from the bottom up and the top down, and that both of those pieces really make a difference. And so now I actually want to shift into a Q&A section. And so why don't we just stop screen sharing and let's be able to look at each other. And I'm just going to pose some questions and let's just have a discussion. And I want to talk first about overcoming provider reluctance to adopt technology. So Carla, could you talk a little bit about how you introduce this to providers, how you build relationships?
So we spend some time first in our intake meeting. Well, actually, I want to even back up. I think from initial recruitment, we're building relationships because we're sending out marketing materials, but we're following up those with phone calls and spending time talking to providers about what our program is. And then we have those intimate info sessions where we also present the material and what our program does, what we offer and our expectations, but we are building those relationships. And then immediately after that, we're doing those visits. And a lot of our work, we have a hybrid model. So a lot of our work is virtual, but we go out and we spend time with them. We have them show us their programs. We tour them. We really get to know them. And then we sit and talk to them about their programs and what makes them special, what their goals are. And then we tie that into the automation of how this automation can make their lives easier, how they can be some of the first to pilot for the state, and how this is where the state's going. And so we want to help them get there. And then I think what really makes the difference is we don't just say, here is the software, here's a couple of trainings, is that we then really walk them through the process of onboarding and how to utilize it. And we don't leave them until they're comfortable. So, and so I think that, we become friends and we are really with them every step of the way.
Do you want to add anything to that, Alma, as a participant?
Well, our center has been here for over 30 years. So we're so used to not using technology until we started using ProCare. And I was really hesitant about doing it because I'm like, it's gonna be time consuming. I have to learn what to do, but it really wasn't. It was really easy. And with the help that Carla, the one-on-one coaching we're having, she made it really easy to understand. And, and having ProCare help us too, really made it really easy to integrate ProCare into the program. And parents love it. They really do. And the staff do as well.
Cool. That's great. And now, Leela, so I think one of the things that's really exciting to me is that you as a state have invested in a totally new way of doing subsidy that's going to be automated. And you're really thinking about rolling that out so that all providers are going to bill you through that automated system and you're going to start supporting them. So you want to talk a little bit about kind of your tiered vision of how you're going to roll this out and different levels of provider participation?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the first big step that we're making in this transformation is automating our attendance tracking. So no longer will we have those paper sign in and sign out sheets. And instead, not only will we have the child care management softwares that will send that information to us, completely eliminate the sign in, sign out sheets, and have a quicker turnaround on child care reimbursement payments to providers. I mean, that's huge. But we do recognize the change management piece of this. And so by integrating the CCMS component into the business practices training, that is our key to not have to require childcare providers to use automation, but incentivize them. So we really want to create an environment where it does improve. It does improve their daily lives and the operations. It's not an additional requirement, an additional portal. It's really integrated into their work. And so we are thinking about, we have our non-certified relative providers, we have our family child care providers, we have group home providers, we have centers. And so we recognize that there is a different set of challenges perhaps in implementing this. And so how do we work with Southwest Human Development in having training that really presents a really friendly and approachable way to using automation, and also making it really clear that this is the direction we're heading, not only as a state administration, but it's what parents' expectations are as well. So this is a really positive way to move us forward to that.
Great. And one of the things that I love about both of you is that you think big. And the idea really is to scale this, like every provider. So when we sit in meetings, we talk about sort of these big numbers. And so I want to talk for a minute about that. So a couple of things. So one thing I think from Leela's side, you made a decision to contract with a vendor that already had APIs or technology bridges with over like a dozen maybe childcare management software. So even though Southwest has chosen to do training right now on ProCare, you said, well, wait a minute, we're not going to limit this to just a ProCare. So you want to talk a little bit about sort of the vision of multiple software packages and or in general, how you're thinking about scale?
Yeah, so it's been really helpful to understand just the benefits of the overall CCMS usage. And so regardless of what CCMS it is, we just want to understand, what is helpful. And I think from there, we have a really unique time where we're also rolling out our market rate survey. We're asking on that survey, tell us if you use a child care management software system, and if so, for what purpose. So we do dream big. So this isn't just on an attendance level, but recognizing that there are other components to this and more opportunity to ask providers what works for you. And we're going to be there to partner with what works for you and hopefully streamline this process.
Cool. And then Carla, so I know that folks who are in the business of training or business training are thinking about, well, wait a minute, how in the world are you going to scale this? But you've thought a lot about how you're going to scale this. So you want to talk a little bit about sort of your plans for growing and how you're going to partner with others in doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So internally, we know that we can hire, some additional business management specialists, and we feel really good about that and our recruitment efforts. But we've also been at this a couple of years, and so we have developed some partnerships. So down south in Tucson, we have a partner, a nonprofit who's doing some contract work for us on another project. We're going to contract with additional of their staff and train them in this piece. We have participants who have excelled in this work that we can partner with. In South Phoenix, we have a group that we work with quite intimately who has been with us for 2 years, who has some incredible staff, and they are also doing some of this work with other providers in South Phoenix. And so we'll contract with them. And so we've just been really lucky. Southwest is oftentimes agencies are very siloed, but we've been really lucky to develop great partnerships throughout the state. We've had some great participants. And so we feel really confident that the training that we have for our new staff, and we have this intensive 2-week training, and then we have continual professional development that we'll be able to, through virtual webinars and in person, that we'll be able to train these partners and bring that to scale. So we're really, really excited about that. And speaking of like an agnostic CCMS use, we also have this amazing onboarding process for CCMS use for automation that can be used with any CCMS, because now we know to chunk, we've learned through this project to chunk that onboarding so to that full utilization.
Great, great. So I'm channeling some of the thoughts that might be going on with people who are watching this webinar. And I suspect that some people are going to say, how in the world do you make changes inside government? We don't feel like there's any capacity in our state to be able to make any of these changes. So I'm just curious, Leela, what advice would you give someone to how to begin to think about introducing these kinds of changes inside government?
I think it's definitely clear communication. And I think in order to have that clear communication, it's putting in the work of being really thoughtful of what problem are we here to solve. And, you know, as Carla just used this term, and chunking it out. So the expectation that this is going to get done in three weeks is impossible. So like really being real with, okay, this is a large investment. It could take a longer amount of time, but what are the first steps that we can take, especially given this ARPA funding, to put us on the path in the right direction? And, you know, our IT folks are here to help us, but they don't know our business as well as we do. So it's really being able to be clear about, well, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Here's programmatically what we need. What's out there that can help us solve this problem? So I'd say it's that, and also the more we can provide that clarity, you see the timeframes of the implementation go down. So it becomes less amount of time because we've done our research. We're really, you know, we understand what's possible, what's available, and then we move forward from there.
So just to sort of share with the audience something that all of us have learned in the School of Hard Knocks, I think the world has really changed in technology. It used to be that technology had to be built individually, state by state, with internal staff from the state or with tech consultants that did custom build. We're now in an environment where there are software as a service products, SaaS products that one can purchase as a license. There are vendor companies doing things called middleware. There are lots of possibilities. So I would encourage those of you who are in other states to really ask those questions, because Leela is working with a lot of outside vendors who are coming in with licensed products that she's then leveraging her in-state work with. And so that makes change much more possible. And now let's talk about that change from your perspective, Carla. So what are you guys learning in terms of what needs to happen to grow, to change? And particularly thinking about resources, like the ARPA resources. Are there things that you're doing differently in this climate or with these new ARPA dollars that we're all sitting on that are related to this project?
We're spending time in staff compensation and retention and making sure that our providers understand that money, the stabilization grants, as they're called here in Arizona, are there for them to stabilize childcare, to retain staff, and to make sure that they're using those monies to do that, to retain staff, to incentivize staff. So we're having lots of conversations and tracking that. So that's one area. As far as the automation, I think we are understanding that we have a role to build capacity so that they're ready when these new things roll out, because they are expensive and there is some time consumption there, so that the providers themselves are ready to embrace this technology. And so there is some of that relationship building, and to understand the importance of technology and truthfully that it's coming. And so to be ready, we want them ready and we don't want them left behind. So there's that.
Cool. Sharon, you had a question about the collection rate. Do you want to ask the question that you were thinking of?
Sure. I'll go off mute and camera for a minute. Yeah. So, Leela, I wanted to just talk for a second about what it was that convinced you that it was really time and worth it to invest in putting technology in providers' hands. And I think you were seeing some of the results of what was going on in Southwest, and I wondered if you could speak to that for just a minute.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the iron triangle. So really learning about that, understanding that the state CCDF subsidy system is part of the revenues. It's that piece of that triangle. So we're part of it. What is our responsibility of being able to have a reimbursement structure that actually fits how the business of childcare works? So in Arizona, recognizing that we can't change everything overnight, it's recognizing that our subsidy reimbursements are attendance-based, full day, part day, over 144 different rates, that are reimbursed probably a month and a half to 2 months after the service is rendered. Yet parents are upfront having to pay for, their registration costs, prepay, their childcare slots. And so understanding that we are a huge piece of that revenue flow. So we have to understand how the childcare business works. So that was the first aha. And then understanding that the pilot was already underway with Southwest Team and Development. And First Things First was super exciting because it was so obvious that that was the path, that there was so much administrative red tape. And the way that we're reimbursing the system is completely opposite of how it actually works. And so it was just understanding that component and then really recognizing that our capacities as state agencies is very limited. Especially here in Arizona, Department of Economic Security, we're an umbrella of many human services. And so when we can leverage external partnerships and best practices that have already occurred in other states or lessons learned, like we can do that and we can move at the pace of our ARPA funding. So I'd say that still sticks with me as that aha moment, is that we play a huge role in that iron triangle. And so we have to modernize our systems to really support the success of our childcare providers.
Great. Other questions, Sharon?
Well, I keep coming back to this idea about having good data, right? And so earlier today we were in a conversation and I was explaining that the way Opportunities Exchange started getting involved in technology at the state level, it's a story that started back with providers. And it was, beginning with understanding that so many providers don't understand the cost of care, especially, broken down by age of the child, right? Alma, you've got so many things going on. If somebody said to you, what's your actual cost for that infant room per child, right? That's it. You don't have the tools or the time to be able to calculate that, right? So where we started on this journey was really building capacity, wanting to build capacity for providers. And we really saw that business software was a key to being able to do that. But it didn't take very long before we started to understand that connecting that software to state systems was also really key, because guess what? States don't really have that data either. And so the way we've approached this whole question of things like, do we have enough childcare or too much in individual communities? Are we paying the right amount? How do we know the answers to those questions? Well, we either do telephone surveys or we send out an email and ask providers who are, just really overwhelmed with trying to run their business. So what's the quality of the data we have? So the possibility of being able to move into just a whole new world where providers understand their business, where the state understands the sector, and we can really kind of move forward. It really is a new day. This really opens up a doorway to a new landscape. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And actually, to sort of end this on this story of the connections, this is a virtual conference. And unfortunately, because so much good work happens, in my experience, in the women's room and the hallways of conferences, right? And I just want to say that this project began that way. A number of years ago, Ginger and I were at Carla's boss, and I think it was at an Alliance for Early Success conference. And Ginger pulled me aside, I think in the women's room or in the hallway, and said, we've been working on quality, and you know what? If we can't help programs stabilize their finances, it doesn't matter whether we do great quality coaching. They're not going to make it. You're right, Louise. You got to come to Arizona. You got to help us figure this out. And we came to Arizona and we started working together with her on this project. She introduced me to you, Leela, and that was the beginning of all of this. So it is also really deeply connected to Southwest's work on improving environments for children and families. And also, let's hope that we're all back live and in person in conferences where we can have these these conversations. And in fact, the Shared Services Conference is happening next month, and both Leela and Carla, and I hope actually Alma as well, will be in Austin, Texas with us. So with that, we probably should close out. Yes, Sharon? So thank you all for being with us in this workshop. And if you need to reach any of us, here are our contact information. And there's the website for Opportunities Exchange, where we have a ton of issue briefs, PowerPoints, resources, all sorts of things that help you to make this case. So thanks so much for participating. And we hope to see some of you in Austin.